right, welcome everybody to the October 28th, 2019 meeting of the Newmarket Budget Committee. And as always, I'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, hey, welcome all the members of the Budget Committee. We do have one excused absence. Zach Dumont let me know earlier this afternoon that he wasn't going to be able to make this meeting, so he's extended. I also wanted to welcome Dr. Susan Givens and Steve Fournier here from both the school and the town to talk about a little bit later on, progress to date. Before we get into that, I would like to make a motion to approve the minutes from the September 23rd, 2019 meeting.
So moved.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Roger. Any questions or comments, or I noticed Patricia isn't here, so if you do have any suggestions or questions on the minutes, just speak into the microphone so we can pick those up on the recording. I didn't really notice anything, so not seeing a whole lot of action, some decent head nods. I'll go ahead and move to a vote. So all in favor of accepting the minutes from September 23, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, seeing none, we are unanimous with one abstention. Great, thanks everybody. At this point, I'd like to welcome Mr. Steve Fournier, the Newmarket Town Administrator, to share some comments and ideas and thoughts about year-to-date numbers. Thanks, Steve.
Well, first I'd like to start with our unaudited end-of-year fiscal 19 figures. It was tight. I'm not going to mince words at all. Down to the point where overall the entire budget we have 5.76% remaining, or $251,000. If we talk about just general fund, which is through taxation, we expended 100%. There's $9,000 left. We never get that tight. When I first got here, we were at the point of almost $400,000 to $500,000 of having money left over. The reasoning, we're budgeting to the bone. There's not any wiggle room in the budgets any longer. The negative of that is we have no money going into fund balance. Very little. The only money we're getting is additional revenues that we can go in there, to the point where, which I'll discuss in a few minutes, where you can't use fund balance to offset any increases in the budget in the coming fiscal year. Usually we'd be using anywhere from $250,000 to $500,000. There's nothing out of the ordinary. We had one overage in solid waste because of contract. As everybody knows, there's been issues with recycling in the world, so that's just the impact on us. So that's the last year's fiscal year. It's unaudited. That will be finished shortly. This year, we're a quarter of the way through, and we're at 38% expended. That's not a red flag, because traditionally at the beginning of a new fiscal year, we expend a lot of the funds. One-time contributions to social services. We do the transfers to capital reserve funds, and a lot of all those other things that are much larger. You have that sheet in front of you. So there's no red flags in that number, even though it's higher than what you traditionally think of as 25%. A couple other items. As you may be aware, that the town council did have their budget workshop on Saturday to review my proposed budget, and we are seeing some significant increases. It's due to our first year debt service on the McAllen Dam project, which is upwards of $200,000. We are adding a new police officer. We are proposing to add a new police officer. We have not had a new police officer since 1995, and we're seeing the calls and the need for that. Other than that, it's mainly operational costs. There's nothing really out of the ordinary that we're asking for. We do have actually one warrant article that the budget committee would review. That is, it's an in and out. We have to get permission from the voters to borrow $75,000 for a sewer study that the state will pay for, but we actually have to vote for it, to borrow it, and then they forgive the debt after. So it's an in and out. The other item that will be impacting the budget this year is that many people are aware that we had our revaluation this past year. Before, we were about $770 million total valuation for the town. We've increased our valuation by 28%. So we are now, before exemptions, $1 billion town. So we're worth $1 billion in assessed value. After exemptions, we're at $977,203,228. So what that means is before, for every dollar on the tax rate, we'd be able to raise $770,000. Now we can raise $977,000 for every dollar on the tax rate. So that will have an impact. Well, we have not set the tax rate as of yet. Figures are still coming in, but we should be doing that shortly. Some other items that, of interest for the Budget Committee, you would not have any vote on this, but there will be a number of questions on the ballot for charter amendments. There are a few that will impact the Budget Committee. These are, the first one, I can just go through all 8 real quick. The first is to really codify in the charter that allows the town to work in conjunction with the school district on different items as we already are, but we're just codifying it in how we do it on our side in the charter. It's basically going to allow the town administrator to negotiate an agreement with approval by the council at the end. The second change will be from oaths of office for the council and any other town side committee or elected position. Currently, as you're all aware, you take office the week after being elected. We found that to be awfully fast for anybody. So what we're doing is we're going to be putting in a question that says you'll be taking office the first Monday in April after the election. So it gives you a month to really, one, see what's going on in town, maybe attend a few meetings, where you can actually do some transition training as well in between that time, instead of jumping in that week after.
Seems unusually kind.
I know, well, it's, if you think of it this way, towns, you actually take office next week. Cities, which you probably see all the signs in the cities around here, you get elected in November, you don't take office till January. So you actually have a much longer period to learn the ropes than you do in towns. The council is proposing a change in the title of the town administrator to town manager. It reflects what the position actually does do. By statute, it doesn't matter what you call the position, but the individual has the authority of a town manager. Part of the thinking of it as well, I'm not going anywhere, but if the position would ever be vacant, it's actually more attractive for candidates to be going for a town manager's position than a town administrator. If you're a town administrator in a traditional town, you only have the authority that a select board gives you, whereas town manager is set by statute. One is that there's an error that says that the clerk is the head election official, which is not by law, it's the moderator. This one actually does impact the Municipal Budget Committee. Currently, if you read the charter, it says the council must approve a budget by November 15th to send to the Budget Committee. Well, the question is, what happens if the council doesn't approve a budget to go to the Budget Committee? So what we're doing is, it's going to have a provision that if the council fails to adopt the budget, the town manager's budget will be presented to the Budget Committee. It'll just bypass the council. That's what happens in other council manager forms. If the council doesn't adopt the budget, the manager's budget becomes law. The other one is, yeah.
Can I ask a question about that?
Sure.
So if the town council, they refuse to approve a budget, you just give us one.
Yep.
I mean, you can come up with anything you want.
No, correct. It's whatever I present to the council, then just goes by the council and gets forwarded to the Budget Committee.
And then the same rules would apply for us that have always applied in the past.
Exactly.
We can move it by up to
10%.
10%?
Yep.
Okay.
So, the other one was, the chair and I were discussing it this weekend, is the schedule for budget public hearings, and when the budget committee has to approve the town's budget. When they adopted the quasi SB2 form for the town, they put in the fact that we'll have a deliberative session, but they never changed the dates for the budget adoption. So it's both. You have the old town meeting dates of early January to adopt the budget, but you have the SB2 form, and we have a completely different calendar than the school district. So, for example, the school district, you have to approve a budget by mid-January. For the town, you have to do it by January 6th. That didn't make sense, so we're actually going to try to bump it out a little longer and say it has to be done by the third Tuesday in January. And the other is, the final one is that the capital improvement committee has to prepare and submit to the council a capital improvement plan. But it doesn't say, it says at least 1 month prior to the final date for submission of the budget. The question is, whose budget? My budget actually includes the capital improvement plan, but if you're going with the council's, I mean, probably one of the largest portions of the budget wouldn't be included in mine. So we're just saying that it has to be submitted 1 month prior to the manager's submittal to the council. And we're using term manager because if that passes, that's what happens. And those are the charter amendments. The budget committee doesn't need to act on those. It's just for information purposes only. Other than that, we are currently reviewing, as the budget committee may be aware, we split our finance director / business administrator agreement with the school district. So we have an interim finance director, and I'm currently looking to appoint a finance director and reviewing that at this point in time. Right now, it's a consultant from MRI who's doing a great job, and everything is getting smooth. And we are also in the middle of doing the update of the entire financial software for the town. So that's a huge project, and it takes a lot of time of the staff. Any questions of me on anything? Yeah, Dan.
So just so I'm clear, the interim person does work for both the town and the school
No,
district?
just the
No.
town.
All right.
So that's one of the things that we're gonna have to, and also it's impacting the budget next year, is currently we're only paying the 40% of a salary. Now we have to pay 100 plus benefits. Yeah.
The McAllen Dam, we're starting to make payments on the loan, the $2 million.
We have to budget next year. It's a $2 million bond. Since the next fiscal year ends in 2021, the first year, even though we haven't withdrawn yet, it's our intention that we'd be taking out that money next year to do the project.
Have we, the RFP, nobody responded to the first RFP. Has anybody responded to this?
We have a pre-bid meeting on Wednesday, so we'll see what goes from there.
Okay, so
We're
don't
going
know-
through the process again.
Okay, you don't know any figures at this point in time?
Not at this point. We're still going with a $2 million figure. The engineer says it's a safe number. But, one thing we have to remember is that traditionally in presidential election years, no matter who the candidate is, we see a dip in the economy. So that's one of the things we're hoping. I hate to say it that way, but the figures don't go too high. But yeah, usually because of the market instability of not knowing who the next president's going to be, you see a little bit of a slowdown in the economy. So,
And when will we know what the bids are, or what the projected cost of the McAllen Dam project is? Will we know that?
You don't get involved.
No, when you finalize it, when the council finalizes.
When the council adopts the resolution with the company that we choose.
When is that scheduled for? Will we know that before this budget cycle? I assume before this budget cycle's over, right?
It should be I guess sometime in January, I'm assuming.
Okay, so what I'm getting at is we've got a $2 million bond, and if the work comes in somewhat less than that $2 million.
Yeah, it's up to. Yeah, but the 200 is if we need to borrow the entire amount.
200. Okay.
Yeah.
So what are you paying then? What are we paying on? How much are we paying? What are we paying
2 million.
We're paying on the $2 million.
Yes.
Even though we may not borrow $2
If we
million?
do not borrow $2 million, then we do not pay on $2 million. we will reduce that amount.
Okay, so, but whatever has been paid will be appropriated towards what?
It goes,
Everybody else
we
will borrow?
won't expend it.
Okay.
So say if it's a $1 million bond and it's $100,000, $100,000 stays in that account. Or the council has the right to transfer somewhere else.
Good choice. No, really, okay.
Yeah, the council's authority to transfer funds. If usually I go to make a recommendation and say, Public Works is overexpended because of snow, and I'll throw out police is underexpended, then the council can transfer funds from the police to cover the expenses in the Public Works. Do we do it? No, because we also want to show what the overages are, so we show what our actual budgets are. Rarely do we ever go in there. But we have to make sure that the bottom line is not overexpended.
So, do I understand this correct? Theoretically, you could take if you don't do the McAllen Dam or something like that, you've got $2 million, you could use that $2 million elsewhere.
No. I'm authorized to borrow $2 million to do the McAllen Dam. There's $200,000 in the proposed operating budget to pay the first year principal and interest.
Okay, I get you.
That's what's going on. That's why there's an increase in the next year's budget on that.
Okay, I get you.
No, I'm only authorized to issue debt for the McAllen Dam.
Okay.
Any other questions? Yeah.
So, for the 2018-2019 fiscal year, the one that just ended, in absolute dollar terms, what were the biggest variances relative to the budget?
Like I said, solid waste was about 64,000. We're gonna Public Works, just because of it, we didn't have a lot of snow, and this is gonna sound odd. Snow is a better thing to have than what we had last year, which was ice and rain. So they were actually out more because of ice and rain than it would have been if we had the blizzards like we did in the past. So we had an overage of almost $30,000 there. Fire and rescue, which we knew was gonna happen, just because of calls, but remember, we do make revenue from calls. We had a $71,000 overage. We've also started covering, in the past, we wouldn't have coverage on the weekends because, volunteer firefighters, like everybody else, wants their weekends. So we started paying a stipend for people to be on call on the weekends, and it's been working. We don't have the call-ins from other communities to cover us. The other large ones, IT, we had some due to the we knew that it was going to happen due to the because of the implementation of the new financial software. That was about 20,000, and 15 also in finance because of that. There was just some unintended technology things we had to pick up in there. Other than that, it was nothing out of the ordinary. And again, we were down to literally $9,000.
All right, not seeing any other comments.
set.
Thank you, Steve, very much for
Thank you.
coming by.
Have a good night.
Yeah. And I will invite Dr. Stevens to give us to her first chance to meet us tonight. Thank you very much for coming on down.
Thank you for inviting me. I don't know that I can be as detailed in my responses as Steve, but I'll do the very best that I can. I'll follow the same kind of format that he did and tell you what I can about the 3 fiscal years that we're actively involved in either closing or in the process of spending or in the process of creating. So for FY19, as the town manager or administrator said, I just, like hot off the press, got a draft of the audited financial statements. I haven't really had a chance to digest them, but I can provide you with at least a little bit of information that maybe you'll find helpful. But I can't really unpack it the way that Steve did because obviously I wasn't here for this fiscal year. But as I looked at it, I wanted to have a better understanding of maybe what our, how we fared budget to actual, and it looks like we underspent the appropriation from last year so that there was money left at the end of the year. Some of that came from unanticipated revenues. I think that was about 80,000, and then the rest came from unexpended funds in the operating budget. So when I'm looking, if I'm reading this correctly, I would hope that I am, there was a fund balance of about 900,000 at the end of the year. My understanding is that you can retain 2.5%, which is about, I'm using round numbers here, about 412,000 or something like that can be retained. And so the balance of that would then, I guess, go back to reducing the tax rate, is my understanding. So that looks like around $500,000. So that's what I can share with you about the FY19. I'm hoping that they'll complete this. There's a few schedules, actually, I would like them to add to what I've, received from them. Thought it was a little light in detail, but I'll work with them to get a little bit more information embedded in those financial reports, because I think when it comes to things like fund balance, that our public would appreciate having some understanding of what the rules are around that. And I think just having a little blurb in there that describes what I've attempted to do with you today would be very beneficial to the average reader of a document like this. So there's a few things that I think that, maybe they could provide a little bit more language in to help the average reader be able to understand the financial position. So that's what I can share with you on that. I'm not sure if I can answer any specific questions, but I'll certainly give it my best to do so if you have a question about last year.
That 900,000 against a budget of, what was it, about 17, 18, somewhere in there?
19, just shy of 20.
All right, so that's like still 4%, or that seems pretty.
Oh, I apologize. I misquoted. So the revenues, I was looking for this page. The revenues, 83,000 in additional revenues, and it's $500,000 in unexpended on the expense side.
Right,
So it's
so we're about
588,000 in total between the two.
versus 19. Okay, that's closer.
Yeah. Apologies for that. It was on this other page. So that must include prior year fund balance on this other worksheet. Again, I was eating my dinner half an hour ago, thumbing through this really quickly so I can maybe give you a highlight or two. So again, I've not seen financial reports written like this, though I have read many, many, many financial reports in my life. So that's why I'm saying, when I'm thumbing through and I'm looking for this, there's no narrative to go along with it to explain these things, which if I'm somebody that's pretty experienced at reading this and the data's not there, it tells me that we ought to be providing a few more pieces of information to help the reader understand the document. So anyway, so let me try that again. Again, 83,624 is what they're saying. We received an unanticipated revenue. And then on the expense side, we underspent by $504,637.
Okay, do you have any, I know you're just probably looking at this for the very first time, so I'm assuming you don't have any particular breakdown of where we big picture, where did we underspend?
The categories they're giving, it's not particularly helpful to me. I mean,
Okay.
like I said, I'm pretty savvy at reading these, but it says that we underspent on the line called instruction,
Which I think would be.
which is the majority of the budget, so that makes sense.
Would that include the special education?
No, I think that is just salaries, where people have left. I think I'm going to assume that that's a big part of it.
And it could be the way things were recorded also, because as I'm looking down, it says that instructional staff services were overspent by 85,000, general administration overspent by 120, and operations and maintenance overspent by 188. So that doesn't kind of really make a lot of sense to me, why that would be. So-
Actually, that makes perfect sense.
Does it?
if you think
Okay,
about
you were
But,
here, so maybe it makes.
I mean, you're overspending in all the things that happen to you when you're downgrading your staff on an experience basis
And upgrading your administration.
to
Well, your
to
operations and
compensate or
maintenance
not, but-
was the biggest portion of overspending. So your operations and maintenance being overspent by almost 200,000, that doesn't really make
Yeah,
sense.
In the midst of a renovation, that's
Yeah,
probably
okay.
not that hard to
Okay.
understand, but.
That would make
Before that,
sense.
we had hired, in last year's budget, we had hired the extra janitor. So maybe
I really wish I could offer you an explanation,
Yeah, no,
but having not
I
been here,
understand where you're coming in on this.
I just, I don't know what was budgeted for, I don't,
So do we know how much actually went back to the tax rolls then? It sounds like it's probably more like
I think,
20,000.
I can show you the page. I believe if I'm reading this, is anybody familiar with last year's report?
Yeah.
So there's a page that's called, it's a footnote.
Well, given the 2% at 200,000, it's 400,000, so I'd say probably 100,000-ish.
Perhaps. I honestly, I just,
Yeah, we'll know more. The sad thing is Susan's coming, Dr. Gibbons is coming in, hitting the ground running, and what she's done in the past 3 months has been amazing. So I apologize if she has to present to you, because none of us knew what happened, probably from June until now.
Yeah, I mean, change happens. I think, now having Dr. Gibbons in place, we get some stabilization, and as the staff ramps up and we start to sort of exercise those muscles that will get us back into sort of the regular reporting, I think we'll see that. So I do appreciate all the efforts you put forward to help
Thank you.
get us even to this point and have some preliminaries to talk about.
yeah. And my focus wasn't on last year, honestly. It wasn't. It's been on this year.
Right.
And trying to get my head around getting you a budget this early in a budget cycle isn't been another thing, without a BA. So,
Yeah, that was gonna be my
Yeah.
next question. How
How
are
did
we
we make
feeling
out?
on the recruiting front there?
Well, so our search process did not result in a candidate to appoint. So I've reached out to some consulting firms. We had been using a consultant that's quite qualified, but not altogether, doesn't have a lot of time available for us, and is unavailable now. And so I reached out to a variety of different consultants and retirees. We were able to contract today for 20 hours, about 20 hours with MRI, with somebody that's a school business administrator, the one that's working for the town, is really, kind of town finance focused. This is a retiree that has been in the field for over 25 years, that really has a lot of knowledge of school finance. She's coming in for just a quick conversation this week, and she's going to be here next week. So she'll be able to read this, and I wish she was here, then she'd be able to say, yeah, this is what it means, and, this is what the impact on the tax rate. I just don't understand those relationships between this document and the processes that you have here. But I will next year. I just don't know the ins and outs quite yet at the level that you would want somebody to be able to answer your questions. So that's where we're at. So we do have some part-time help coming on board. I have Rachel, who maybe you're familiar with her. She was really kind of your bookkeeper for a lot of years. So she's been working, extra days, to fill in the voids. So we're kind of patching to hold things together. And we're making some progress, but I know it's not what you would like to see. It certainly isn't what I want, but I think people are working really hard to try to keep us, afloat and moving in a positive direction. We're going to relaunch the search during what we would call the hiring season. So at the end of January, we'll relaunch the search when you're more apt to get qualified school business administrators. We should be an attractive community. My understanding is most SAUs are multiple communities, which means multiple reporting requirements and such. Also, when I was speaking with the interim BA that would be coming in, she also felt that she would be able to kind of advocate for us and try to do some recruiting on our behalf too, since she has the connections here in New Hampshire and has been in the field here for a long time. So I feel very optimistic if we go out right after the budget season, when folks can actually look at ads and maybe put their application in, that we'll get a good pool of candidates and have somebody on board by the end of the year. So that's the hope.
It's peculiar to me that people who have this skill set would be out looking for work in the middle of all the school district's fiscal years. Any particular reason why that's the case?
Notice, like, people who work
Yeah,
in districts, you have to be pretty early, so
Yeah.
you may still be doing the job. But you do notice.
Yeah, usually typical of a contract for somebody at that level is a 90-day clause. So if you're putting your ad out in January, and you go through the process, which is usually a 6-week process, then you can appoint somebody, they can give their appropriate notice, and that, school district can then go through a hiring cycle too, so that you don't go with big gaps. So our target would be to start somebody July 1. If we could get them in June, great, but that's our thinking. Hiring this time of year, especially understanding now more about, the New Hampshire budget cycle, I can understand why you're not getting an applicant pool as rich as you otherwise would. Also, it was not particularly attractive to school business administrators to apply to a place that had shared services, so that was also a lot of feedback that I received. Although we're government, they're kind of two different genres with two different, kind of dynamics in terms of reporting entities and some requirements. And not all SBAs have the knowledge on the school, on the town side, and vice versa. Not all town, like finance people, have all the experience that you would look for in somebody who's overseeing a school operations. So we're hopeful. I'm always optimistic, though. So.
Well, thanks for coming forward. Clearly, the machine will lurch forward and will, like you said, hold the line as we are right now, and then as more staff get online and become familiar with things, see the smoothness happen again too. So.
I do have a question.
Yes.
Do we have an idea of the state funding for Newmarket? Is it going to be significantly more this year or about the same?
Well, now that I can answer. So based on the budget that was adopted by the state, we're supposed to receive $236,000 more.
How much?
$236,000.
Oh, that's all?
So that's the good news. The bad news is they changed the regulations for our Medicaid program, and so instead of getting about $200,000 in revenue for reimbursements there, based on the rule changes, we'll be losing about $190,000 in that revenue. So this year we were able to bill out some back billing, and so we'll be able to kind of, it won't be such a dramatic change in our revenue overall for this year. Next year it'll be about a wash. So, in other words, they're taking $236,000, putting in our left pocket, and they're taking $190,000 out of our right pocket. So it's not as rosy as perhaps we would hope.
Where does most of the Medicaid spending go? Is that for special education?
Yes, it's reimbursement for services we provide for students with special education, yeah.
So it's kind of a crapshoot what it costs you for special education from year to year. Depends on what you get for kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
We've often said this, 3 or 4 years ago, you often heard our superintendent say, you could get a heavy hitter.
Right.
Meaning you can get somebody with a lot of needs, that means a lot of care. Now you can wipe out our whole special ed
Right,
budget.
right. Do we have a feel for that for this upcoming year?
We're a transient town, you actually could get anybody,
Just at any time, okay.
and now you could wipe us out.
Bummer, all right, sorry.
Yeah.
Welcome to the fire.
Yes, no, I know, it's a world I'm familiar with. So so on this year's, one of the areas I've been focusing attention on is making sure that the building projects reconcile. That was something that, having lived through this experience before, when building projects span multiple years, and all the efforts going into, the project, making sure that, that all of your financial information is reconciled, both between your clerk of the works and your business office. So that has been a project that we have been working on, and there is reconciliation now. And we've had to make some adjustments in order to make that reconciliation clean. But that has happened, so just so you know, that I was able to give the school board a report, and maybe I should have brought one here. I'm not sure if that's something you're interested in, but I can certainly share it if that's, is that something you're interested in? So I'm about to do an update on that, and by Friday, fingers crossed, that I can put the time and attention in, I should have the first report for our financial status for the FY20 budget. I don't have that tonight, but my goal is to have that by Friday. If not, I'll work over the weekend and get it to the board for the November 7th meeting. So I could provide you with that report as well. But those two will be updated, so I'll at least have those two pieces done. So we'll be current. So I feel like we're current on 19 now, which is great. We're about current on FY '20 in terms of our financial reporting, which is great. And as of today, all of the administrators have provided me with their budgetary recommendations. So we're going to start working on FY '21. So that's where we're at.
Great.
In the school.
Just remind me, which year of our busing contract are we in? When is
The
that
last
up?
one.
So that's up again
This year,
this year.
the year we're in. I did reach out to them. Some of this is really challenging without having a business administrator to do all this bidding. I did reach out to them, and they said that they would allow us to roll their contract for one more year, and it's likely that that's what I'll recommend to the board, simply because there's no capacity to go through that level of a bidding process right now without having the staff in place to do that and do that well. So,
Which means we're paying too much. I'll leave it at that. Are there any other questions? Great, thank you, Dr. Gibbons.
You're
for coming
welcome.
down. I really appreciate your time.
thank you for your patience as I ramp up.
Great. You too. The next order of business is just Joe and Christian have been kind enough to support the CIP commitments from the Budget Committee. Sorry, go ahead,
And
Ryan.
I just, for one question when you're noted that they're finishing the audit, I assume that's on 19, is that correct, the town audit?
I'm sorry, who mentioned the end? Oh, Steve Fournier. I believe that was on the 2018-2019 budget.
Okay, and do those same auditors audit the school? What is it?
That is a good question. I do not know the answer to that.
Thinking that they're separate. I think they're separate.
And what is the state of the school audit?
Last year we passed with flying colors. Dr. Gibbons has looked at it and asked them to come back and do it again with more details. She wasn't satisfied with the way it came out. She didn't see the numbers matching, so I'm doing it again.
Do we need to audit again?
Yep, she asked our auditors to come back
To come back and make another presentation?
and finish it.
And this is also for the 2018-2019 fiscal year?
Yes. That was one of the first things she looked at when she got here, and she didn't like what she saw. She didn't feel like it was thorough enough, and actually called them up and asked them to do it again.
What report do you think she had? Was that the first one or the second one?
That might have been the second one.
Okay, that's what I was wondering.
Yeah, she just got it.
I should have asked her this, I don't know if you know, the report she had, is that the state DOR report, or is that not out yet?
That's not out yet. I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure that's not out yet. That was just our audit.
And that's the preliminary second audit, or the final, we weren't happy with the final first audit from the
No.
sound of it.
Not at all. And I think if you went back and looked at our meetings, the board wasn't happy with what the audit said. And there were questions asked that weren't answered. So when Susan actually came on board, she had even more questions and asked them to come down.
Does the budget committee ever meet with the auditors, or the auditors with the budget?
No, we don't.
They report only to the
Right, the administrators.
administrator?
Yep.
Yeah, our statutory authority is prospective in nature, not retrospective. So,
I think we can ask for a copy of those reports if we want.
sure.
Like I was saying before, we wanted to get a quick update on the CIP recommendations, and so, Joe, I'll throw it over to you just to give a quick.
Okay, so you sent out to everybody the final spreadsheet that they
Yep.
had, okay, so there wasn't a whole lot of detail in that one spreadsheet. I do have the book, we probably got a couple more if anybody wants to see the detail behind it, but, by and large, this, what was requested was approved. There were a couple of things that the capital improvement program, people didn't approve of. One was some, $8,000 for, Beach Street. There's a building on Beach Street that the town uses for meetings or whatever. They didn't recommend that expenditure. The recommendation was, come back and say, what do you want to do with this facility at some point in time, rather than keep putting money into it. There was, $38,000 for some athletic field work that they didn't recommend. And then there's a couple of things, that were in the school budget for like $1 million almost for a field, and $160,000 for, a courtyard that they moved out to a future, that they're not gonna request that money for this cycle. But other than that, most of the stuff was, you can't argue with it, wiring, roofing, equipment upgrades. Again, if anybody wants to see it, I have the detailed book.
I have one question. $7 for police vehicles? Am I reading that right?
How much?
I just was wondering if it was a typo. It says 7.
Well, the multiple vehicles.
Oh, 7 vehicles, not $7.
Yeah, there was a $7 expenditure for something, for the radio or something like that. There is a $7
Oh, okay.
item.
Steve had explained it was because you can't spend certain funds for that purpose. He talked about it at the last town meeting. So they had to put in something, but this isn't the place for where that funding should be coming from.
Okay. Interesting.
Joe, do you know when they refer to the community center bleachers, portable bleachers, is that the rec center?
Yes, yeah.
I don't know if they're actually, I'm gonna look at this.
All right, well, thank you very much for all the support of CIP that you gave this year. I know there's an extra time commitment there, so we appreciate that you guys stepped up and went to those meetings and contributed to that thinking.
I didn't make it to Saturday's meeting when they presented it to the town. Obligation, I wish I was there to do that.
Yeah. I don't see anybody here to introduce other business, so I'll move right into adjournment. Can I have a motion to adjourn? Thanks, Gary.
Second.
Thanks, Jeff. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
No opposed. We are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.